Hi everybody, I'm just preparing a short video to demonstrate some of these tools that have been developed to make SAP calculations a little bit less stressful and ideally a little bit quicker. So the toolbar is shown here. This first icon on the left is just used for setting up the licenses. So if we go from left to right, the next tool here is for setting up the north direction. So if you've got a site like a housing development with houses at all different angles, you can handle that quite easily. Just key in a north bearing and that displays in SketchUp. Get that all set up nice and simple, and then all you have to do now is start drawing your dwelling. So you might have something a little bit like this. Let's just draw a really simple house shape and apply a pitched roof. And what you can do is simply right click on a surface and then do assign SAP materials. You can do wall, floor, roof. All the common situations that you'll come across have been pre-programmed in here. So I'll do SAP wall type 1, and then that end wall I'll do wall type 2. They come with slightly different patterns, so you can easily differentiate between them. And then on the roof I can do roof type 1. Perhaps on the other side I'll do roof type 2. And with that set up, there's also the next tool along is what I call the query tool, and you can use that to get some stats about a certain face. So that tells you the material, the angle, the pitch, and also the direction that would apply in SAP. So that particular one is facing southeast. That's useful for complicated models where you've got all sorts of different angles going on. Yeah, it just makes life a little bit easier there. Once that's done, you can essentially select your dwelling, create a group, and you give it a name. So we can call that house number 1. And yeah, with that set up, you can then press this button here, which will export your areas. So everything that we've just put in there is listed out in this table that can go straight into Excel. So you've got your wall areas, your roof areas, their orientation and their pitch, etc. You can copy this into Excel and use that for further exports. So I'll now jump to a more finished and complicated model. So after a while, you might end up with something looking a little bit more like this. And if you were to then run that export tool, we have loads of different flats identified in this block, all created, simply by assigning those materials. If we were to hide that, you can see that we've also got internal partitions in there as well. So we've got everything you really need. If I was to run the tool there, end up with a huge table, all your different surfaces and everything else. You can then take that into Excel, post-process it. Probably a subject for another video, but you can then start to generate XML files to go into SAP software, so you can really fully automate the process of doing big models quite quickly. So that takes care of the areas aspect, but it's also very challenging to do thermal bridges and keep track of those. So it's really ideal to be able to do that from a 3D model, so that the next set of tools relate to that. So what I'll do now is I'll just add another scene and then use this button to create a style that's going to be friendly for creating the thermal bridges. So it's a wireframe style with quite thick lines. I then tend to isolate one floor just so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So we've got one floor of the block of flats, and this button can then be used to create layers for each thermal bridge. There's a couple of extra fields that you can choose from. Shared bridges, where you've got blocks of flats, terraced houses, and you might have to record the sharing number and resistance factors for where there's unheated or semi-conditioned spaces like garages. But for now, I won't go into that, and I'm just going to answer no to this. What that then does is it creates a folder in the tags called thermal bridges, and it's got all the different thermal bridge types in SAP that you could need, and they've all got different colors as well. So as we start to create our wireframe model, they should be distinguishable as far as possible. So what we can do now is we can start choosing a thermal bridge type. I'm going to have a go at these lintels, and I'm simply using the line tool to add some lintels on top of the windows, nice and quick, just tracing around them. Do one more there. Then you can pull the drop down, do the sills next. And let's do the jambs. Simply tracing over that wireframe model. We could do something else as well. Perhaps we could do a external corner. Another useful tool when working in this wireframe mode is this button here, which disables face creation. So with that mode activated, when you complete a loop or a face, like drawing all four sides of a window, it essentially stops SketchUp from creating that surface in between, which can become problematic further down the line. So you can simply work with that mode activated. Okay, great. So once you've got all your thermal bridges labeled and you've worked your way down the list to include all of them, you should end up with a model that looks a little bit like this. The final step is to tidy up each dwelling into its own group of bridges, and then you can give it a name. So for example, that one's labeled flat 5, that one's flat 3, flat 1, etc. And then in a similar way to the areas, we've got an export tool. If you were to press on run thermal bridge export, it looks for that tag folder with the thermal bridges in it. So we've got all the ones going down here, and we can press OK. And then it's essentially giving you a summary. So you've got all the different types of bridge, the length, and the different flats that it belongs to. So you've got your PO3s, E25s, E16s, etc. And then that can be exported into Excel or essentially any other software for post-processing. As I briefly mentioned with the areas tool, you can then actually write that to XML as well, so that it could potentially go directly into SAP software. And then the final tool on the toolbar is this one here, and that's very simply for labeling the thermal bridges. So you can click that. You've got a couple of options for short, which is just the code, or the full label, which is the full name. That gets a bit busy if you include all of it. And then it works like the text label tool in SketchUp, so you can click on a junction and then it will just provide the reference there. So if you wanted to put a graphic in a report, or maybe show the certification body what you've done, if you've got a tricky project, can often be quite challenging, where there might be a few ways of interpreting which type of bridge you've got. So you could create a little graphic like that to send off.